Hello and welcome to another edition of the Osceola Seminole Sidelines. My name is Pat Burnham and I am joined by Bob Ferrante and Nick Carlisle. Guys, I haven't seen you in a couple of days. In a couple of minutes. What's going on?
Couple days.
Couple of minutes. I recovered.
Got a little short intermediate little gap in viewing there.
Yeah. Well, and short is the operative word for
it is very short.
FSU 17th practice, which is some of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk a little bit about FSU 17th practice on Wednesday morning, which we were at a little bit earlier, and that's what we were referencing. We're also going to talk a little bit about the 2024 schedule, and actually this article gets more intriguing by the practice, and it might want to reshift some numbers on that thing. But the Osceola staff over the weekend, we took the entire schedule. We all turned in our votes for toughest opponent to weakest opponent, and we combine those. And we're going to kind of run through that with our viewers and listeners today, and then talk a little bit about some of the rivals' top 250 updates. We saw. We definitely saw a lot of movement, some more than others, up and down. But we'll talk a little bit about where Florida State commitments stand. And then I did a fact or fiction with the national rivals guys earlier this week on Solomon Thomas. And I'm going to ask Nick what he thinks about my answer to that question. And so we'll have a little bit of fun. All right, guys. So 17th practice in the books. I think everybody was happy it was a short practice. I can tell you the players were happy not to have pads on. I can tell you I was happy to realize when we got up there that it might be a shorter practice. And then when they didn't have shoulder pads on, just helmets and spider pads. And I actually don't think they're spider pads. I think it's the catapult equipment that they wear underneath their jerseys that kind of keeps track of all their analytics. But anyway, guys, heavy special teams today. Bob, what were your it's hard to have a ton of takeaways from today's practice, but what were some of your takeaways? I mean, what stood out to you?
Yeah, I think when you got a schedule that goes Monday through Saturday, you have to figure there's going to be a built-in day where it looks a little bit different. It's going to have that special teams focus, and today was that day on the calendar. My only two offensive takeaways, I thought Ja'Kai Douglas had a really phenomenal catch. He's been stacking some good practices, very limited 11-on-11 work today, so not a ton of offense versus defense takeaways, but Douglas, I think, has bounced back from kind of those shaky days of camp. Lewayne McCoy continues to impress with his footwork. The guy just got advanced footwork with what he can do as far as just a route running, those kind of juke moves. It was fun watching him a couple times. But yeah, it was a big special teams day, not exactly a huge kind of takeaway day for us, but I do think it gave us a good chance to talk to John Papuchis, and we can get into that just as far as his thoughts about where defensive ends are, where he feels about the special teams, because we feel good about defensive ends and special teams in camp so far.
Yeah, the one thing I was thinking about is they went through the special teams practice, and listen, I don't want to overblow it, but I was a long snapper. It was part of what I did in college besides being a center. But they are replacing an All-American long snapper, and I didn't realize it until today when they're working on the punt drill, and I was like, oh shit, that's not Rosenberry out there. The first thing I noted, and I tried to create waves, but the snap was below the punter's knees. I was like, all right, well, who snapped that? And of course, we have not seen it. Let me make this very clear. We have not seen a bad snap on punts all year. So I'm not saying that. It just made me realize that that's going to be a new guy that gets on the field for the first time on a national stage and those kind of things. But it did more so personnel. But I am excited about we obviously can't talk too much about it, but who we've seen them work at punt return, and both the punters look. It's always fun to watch Master Romano kick the ball. I mean, that kid might be he's one of the bigger punters in the college football, I'd have to think. But it was fun. But yeah, it was very fundamental. I mean, I'm talking about wings working with tackles on how to take the proper steps in field goal protection. The same thing with the center guards and tackles. It was that kind of detail. It was working on running lanes for your kickoff coverage. It was working on, securing your running lane on kickoff return. And we saw a lot of onside kick work, both receiving and kicking. And it was a very full day. We did not see a lot of team, but Nick, what were your some of your key takeaways from what little we did see today?
Yeah, I hate to just bounce off the back of what Bob said, but I did notice Ja'Kai Douglas as well as he did today. Ja'Kai had a drop earlier on in the practice, but he came back and had 2 more down the stretch that were really nice. And that one throw that Bob was talking about was from DJ, about 15, 20 yards down the field, back shoulder throw. He came in. Norvell would have been very pleased with his catch because he went up with 2 hands. And, Norvell likes to stress that, but he went up with 2 hands, caught it back shoulder. Really nice. These practices certainly aren't the best for learning about this team, but it's always, I think, good to have practices like this where that they're working the fundamentals, and that's something that we've seen, throughout the past 3 to 4 years under this current coaching staff, is that they're going to stress the fundamentals and the special teams, and that even though it's not the most entertaining thing to watch during practices, that's what's going to show up on Saturdays and in key moments is being very good in those areas.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's hard to take anything away from the day, overly positive or overly negative. It was good to see Ja'Kai back. They do need, make a play in the pass game. We have not seen a lot of down the field success in camp, but at least not. They might have had them in scrimmages, but here lately. So it was nice to see that. I think you're right, about 10 to 15 yard little route as he came across the formation. But yeah, so listen, as we've said, in today's era of college football, the way teams practice, I think it's really hard to know what you really got until that first game, right? I mean, we saw, we were talking last year about how good we thought this offense was going to be, and that any defense was going to have a hard time stopping it, keeping it from 40 points a game, those kind of things. We looked wrong in the first half of the LSU game, and boy, they closed that thing up in the second half and did exactly what we thought we would do. Now, I think we had a little bit better idea of what was going to happen with last year's team because we knew more about last year's personnel. Got a lot of first-year guys here, so we'll get into that as we go. But yeah, listen. We got to practice on Thursday. I believe the players are off on Friday, and then we're going to see a scrimmage on Saturday. I think the players are off on Sunday again, then back on the field on Monday. So we'll be back out there tomorrow. All right. So we got a couple of questions before we start looking at the 2024 schedule. All right. So Briley asked, could Deuce Spann or Kevin Knowles end up displaying the most growth in camp? All right, so Bob, I'm gonna let you handle this one, and then Nick and I can pile on if we agree or disagree.
If you want to go glass half full, I'll go yes to some extent on Kevin Knowles. Kevin's had some really good days. Honestly, didn't notice him a ton early in camp. Had some good practices in Jacksonville, and then of course earlier this week. So I would say yes on Kevin Knowles, just because he is a nickel. We think he can be impactful. I don't know how many reps he's going to have, what that snap count's going to look like. I think you like Kevin's experience and the fact that he can fit in well. He knows the communication, the organization, the scheme, it works. Deuce Spann, I'm probably going to pass on this. I know we fall in love with the body type, the speed, the capability that might be there. It's just not there consistently enough for me. I'd rather go out there with some of the other receivers. Again, I think Malik Benson, Ja'Kai Douglas are easily your top 2 guys, and then we'll figure out the rest maybe as the practices go along, as the coaches let Georgia Tech unfold. I'd rather let Jalen Lucas see some more catches out of the backfield. I'd rather let some freshmen get the ball instead of Deuce Spann. I'm not totally down on it. I just think there's other better options from a developmental standpoint.
Yeah, I would think. I mean, with Kevin certainly has had a couple of good days here here in the fall camp. I don't know how well that's going to translate into actual game reps. Obviously, he's gotten experience at a multitude of positions. Safety obviously wasn't very optimal for him last year. He's had a couple of good weeks. I don't know if I would call him the most improved. I guess. Briley, what would you mean by most? Are we talking about most growth in the last 3 weeks compared from start to where we are now, or just most growth overall? I would probably have to give it to some of the linebackers on the defensive side. Maybe somebody like a Blake Nicholson, Blake Nicholson actually had a really nice play where he shot up the gap and was able to chase down. I can't remember if it was Brock or DJ, but probably one of the linebackers, probably the most growth from the start to where we are now. Offensively, I don't know if I can name somebody in particular.
Oh, that's easy. Andre Otto.
Morlock. Oh, Andre Otto.
Otto.
Okay. Well, that is a good point. You could talk about it, but we both saw him on the what do you call that? I don't know if it's not a machine, but it's he was putting in some extra time after practice today. So
it's like a buckboard, basically. Back in the old days, we called it a buckboard, but it's where you work on setting your hands for pass protection. He's got different dummies or different bags set in front of you, different angles.
He's punching the bags a little bit.
Yeah, so Andre's working on punching the bags. But yeah, listen, I think offensively it's got to be Andre Otto. I told somebody today by the end of the year that kid will be starting somewhere on that offensive line. I think, and that's a redshirt freshman. So yeah, I think going there now. Yeah, I think Kevin out of those two has had the most growth in camp. I would not choose either one of those guys for most growth out of the entire team. I'm not sure who I would go with on defense. I think you mentioned the linebackers, both Cam and Blake have come a long way. But yeah, I think Deuce is like Bob said, we're all enamored by the length and the speed and the athleticism. And I think right now he's got the same problem that everybody in his position group does, lack of consistency. And so, listen, that's all, we've all seen Deuce make a great catch. We've all seen him make he's made a couple really long runs after the catch in his career. So, listen, still time in camp. I do think Kevin is, I think Kevin is trying, I think we've talked about it, I think 2 or 3 days ago. Kevin looks like he is having a much better camp this year than he did last year. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that's I think you got a pretty good idea of how we all think there. All right. Next question. Who do you guys think will start at linebacker next to DJ Lundy? And we had actually a nice debate about this in our preseason depth chart internally, because you got a lot of people that thought it was going to be Sean Murphy, and a lot of people thought it was going to be Blake Nicholson. Then they bring Cam in. It's either going to be Blake or Cam, I believe. I think those two guys have shown the most in camp. So if you had to ask me who I thought it was going to be, I would say Blake. That would be, he's been in the system longer. He's got more reps in Adams' defense. They are splitting a lot of time between all the linebackers, so it's really hard to tell where they are in the depth chart once they get in the team. I think they're still trying to figure all that out. Listen, we know we're going to see a lot of oars on the depth chart on Sunday when it's released. So, but if you had to ask me who I think is going to start, I think you're going to see Blake start, and then Cam play a lot with Blake at that position. Well, what do you guys think?
I take the opposite approach. I think it's probably going to be Riley. My initial reaction was, I wonder if we're assuming that Lundy is going to line up at Mike linebacker.
If he plays linebacker, he's going to be your inside linebacker. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I think if there's a couple ways to think about this, and Bob, maybe you and I are on the same wavelength here, but there's the battle between the seniority and the reps in the system. Blake definitely has more reps in the system, but Riley has more experience playing overall. I think we've seen enough from Cam to say that maybe that he is that starting guy next to Lundy. That's kind of where I'm leaning, but would I be surprised to see Blake there starting on the depth chart there come August 24th? I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah, I think if we're asking who are the best two linebackers on the roster currently, you probably lean toward Cam Riley. The other question would be, do you go Lundy and Nicholson so that they can sort of play off each other, and DJ can talk to Blake and they can learn from each other, whereas then Cam can work with a younger linebacker in the twos. We see that sometimes where the defensive tackles, it's not always Farmer and Jackson lined up next to each other. They like to mix and mingle to some extent, that tandem. So I think there are, Pat, to your point, there's going to be a lot of oars. Yep. There's maybe not a right or wrong answer, but there are some good options.
No, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, I think both those kids are going to play a ton of football for Florida State. I would think that they're going to be, if you had to ask me who the top four are going to be when we get to camp, despite the number of combinations that we've seen, I think it's going to be DJ and Omar on one side, and I think it's going to be Blake and Cam on the other. Now, I think Blake and Cam will rotate more in than DJ and Omar. Although you would hope that Omar or whoever, Cryer, whoever is going to back up DJ, you would hope that they would continue to develop and get more experience. But right now, I think you feel really good about 3 guys, if you include DJ in that group at one linebacker and another 2. Yeah. So I think, listen, there's no wrong answer to that question. They're both going to play. That at the end of the day, I think the first guy out there is going to be 20, and you guys think it's going to be 18. Well, we got to put a little friendly wager on that. So who's got dinner at Glory Days or who's got lunch at Glory Days? Y'all don't use one of Jerry's gift certificates, by the way, if I win.
Okay, I was about to say, I think Jerry's got all of us no matter what we put down.
Yeah, that's why I say Glory Days. That's why I say Glory. All right, anyways. So let's take a look. All right, so we got another question. This is from Woodside Knoll on our board. Has anyone locked down the other safety position opposite Shaheem? All right. Well, I think it's now, Bob. I'm going to let you handle this one because you spend more time watching the DBs than I do. So you got quite a number of candidates there. You got Hussey, Devontae Brown, KJ Kirkland. Who do you think ends up locking down that other safety position as our preseason before FSU came out? That was our preseason depth chart. Who do you think out of that 3 will end up, or could it be Ashlyn Barker?
Yeah, I'll stick with Conrad. I still think he's the best option. I think, again, young, second-year guy, propensity for the takeaway. I really like what Conrad gives you. I don't think Devontae Brown is a bad answer at all, though. I think Florida State needs to keep developing safety. I'm not sure if Ashlyn Barker is accelerating in his development enough yet to be in that conversation. I still think the top guys are probably going to be Conrad and then Devontae.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. It's going to be interesting. I listen to that whole group. It's going to be fascinating to see how they develop through the season because they got a chance to be really, really good if they all live up to their potential. And I think they have a chance to be deeper than we thought they were going to be probably in the spring. So I agree with you there. All right, so who is winning or won the right tackle position? I'm assuming that is offensive right tackle. I think we all agree it's going to be Jeremiah Byers to start the season. Now, listen, we hear Mike talk all the time about individual in-season development and positional group development, but right now I'd have to say it's going to be Jeremiah. He started there I think every game last year, maybe save one. And listen, they've got some depth there this year that they have not had. You feel pretty good across the board with the kind of guys they got behind him, Jalen Early and Andre Otto and their development, if they keep on coming. But and then you also, listen, we know if something were to happen, they may shift some guys around. But, yeah, you guys agree it's going to be Byers?
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think the better question would be who would it be if not Byers, because I think that opens up a can of worms. Obviously we like Otto quite a lot, but I think he's trending more towards inside. Who would you throw out there that has tackle experience otherwise? Rob Scott. Rob Scott has been there on the left-hand side most of the time. I know that's kind of either or, but I don't know. Who would you throw in there if not Byers? Like, let's say that Byers, God forbid, goes down with an injury or something.
Well, I would think right now it'd have to be either Otto or Early, right? To me, that's who it would have to be. One of those 2 guys. I think that would be one of those guys be the first one in. You're not going to move anybody that you have at guard out the tackle out of what we consider to be the first 2 groups of that group. I guess you could theoretically move Armella back out. I don't see that happening, but you could move him back out. So I think it's either going to be Otto or Early behind Byers, but we'll see how it plays out. Listen, as we talked to Andre yesterday, he's worked at just basically all 5 positions. The only position I have not seen him work at is left tackle. I don't think we're releasing any inside information by saying that. The kid mentioned it yesterday. I think you're starting to see the development of the next Darius Washington and Chris Andre Otto, where he's going to be a guy, he wants it enough. He's willing to be unselfish and go anywhere he has to go. So listen, I think it'd be one of those 2 guys. And I think it's going to be fun to watch some of these young offensive linemen because we know that Alex is going to rotate throughout. We've seen that before where one guy plays half the game at a guard and somebody else comes in and plays the second half. We saw that happen a couple times last year. So, I think it's a good problem to have that, we're talking about they have options if something were, like Myers were to, something were to happen there, or they need to bring in the backup for whatever reason. All right. So you are Mike Norvell. FSU is receiving the ball versus Georgia Tech. And after a decent return, we are to begin our first drive of the 2024 season at the 36-yard line. What is the first play you call? Well, I don't know what I call. I don't know what I'm going to call, but I know who's getting the ball. And it's going to be Jalen Lucas.
I knew it.
Put money down on that one.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, I stay
Very
on my
return.
bandwagons.
36-yard line. That's not bad. That's not bad for return standards.
No. So what play are y'all calling? Y'all watch this offense. What play are y'all calling?
I think the answer is if you're going to throw the ball, it's going to be a short confidence building throw from DJ to somebody. It's going to be like a 5 or 10 yard variety. And I'm with you. If it's Jalen Lucas, fine. If it's Malik Benson, fine. But you are in confidence building mode for DJU from the start.
Yeah, I 100% think it's going to be a run.
I think it's a fair one too.
I'm kind of diving into all of my college football 25 knowledge and just
I knew this was where he's getting all his knowledge from.
This is all of my football knowledge, all from a video game. No, in all seriousness, no. I would wager that it is probably a run as well. Maybe outside tackle run to the left side, to Washington side, with Roy Dell. It's probably what I'm calling first. Get that. I think you got to get the run game going. I think as much as you can run inside with this offense, I think there's a lot of speed to be had on the outside, especially with some of the guys like, Tolafili and Jalen Lucas. So either run to the outside or maybe something with motion with Lucas. Lucas could be a little bit of eye candy, have him motion across the line. Something along those lines.
I say they come out in the Wildcat with Lucas at quarterback, and that's the first play of the game.
How about the wishbone?
Quarterback power with Jalen Lucas in the quarterback. A little play out, slave slots. Play. If they're gonna throw the ball, it's definitely gonna be play action. You're right about that, Briley. You're right about that. Yeah. Listen, I think it's. I think Nick's actually probably right. I think it's going to be read zone to the right wide side of whatever field or whether that's right or left. I think it's going to be Roy Dell or Toafili on inside zone off RPO action. So read zone action. That's what I think. But all right, guys. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break and hear from our sponsors. And then we're going to come back and talk a little bit about FSU's 2024 schedule, and would love to see your questions about the schedule and your comments about who you think the toughest is, the weakest, because that's what we're going to be talking about. We'll be back in 50 seconds.
Hey, Seminole fans! Alumni Hall is your ultimate FSU shopping experience and has moved to a new location off Timberlane Road in Tallahassee. Shop FSU gear from Nike, Champion, New Era, Yeti, and more. Alumni Hall has Seminole gear for the entire family, plus accessories and gifts. Spend $150 and you'll earn $10 off your next purchase with their Hall Pass rewards. Stop by their new location on Timberlane Road near REI, or shop anytime online at alumnihall.com. Alumni Hall, where Seminole fans shop. Finding an experienced lawyer you can trust is crucial. With over 50 years of combined litigation experience, the attorneys at Mowry Law Firm are dedicated to providing our clients with exceptional legal services, focusing on car and trucking accidents, premises liability, and wrongful death. Call 904-824-7799, MowryLaw.com.
All right, we are back with the Osceola Seminole Sidelines, talking a little bit about Florida State's 17th football practice. And boys, it seems hard to believe that we've already been at this 17 days and really almost a month, right? Finally, officially a week and a half out from the game. So it's going by quicker than I thought. All right, so guys, we spent some time this weekend because we had some, I guess, for lack of a better term, free times on our hands. So what we chose to spend doing with it was breaking down the Florida State 2024 football schedule. And kind of what we did is we sat down individually, Bob, Kurt, Nick, and I, and we You got 12 points for a team that got your first place vote, down to 1 point for the 12th place team. And so we ranked Florida State's opponents by strength, toughest to weakest. And so we're going to unveil that right now. Then we're going to talk a little bit about each of them. All right. So these are our rankings. Now, this is not our individual rankings, but we, as a group, came down with, and we're going to talk a little bit about where we agree and disagree on some of these moving forward. But we had Notre Dame as the toughest game on Florida State scheduled, followed by number 2, Clemson, number 3 at Miami, number 4, Florida, number 5 at SMU, number 6, neutral site, Georgia Tech, number 7, Memphis, number 8, North Carolina, number 10, Cal, number 11, BC, and number 11, 10. Anyway, I think you guys know what I mean. But 8, North Carolina, 9, Cal, 10, BC, 11, Duke, and 12, a game that should not be played, Charleston Southern. All right, so that's where we're going to start. We're going to start with number 12, guys, and we're just going to go ahead and get that out of the way because it was a unanimous choice. It was Charleston Southern. Here's how I'm going to get on my soapbox one more time before this Charleston Southern week. These games should not be allowed to happen anymore. We are past these in college football. This is a scheduled win. Earn your money. Just don't give it away. That's what's going on here. This is not good. This is not fair to the fans. This is not fair to the kids. You have 85 scholarship players going up against 63. We saw in 2020 where FBS football teams would not play if they didn't have 55 scholarship players against a team that had more than that in the COVID era. Now they're signing contracts with teams that only have 60. There is a player safety concern here. Those guys are not as big, as fast generally. And, listen, people are paying a lot of money to come to these football games, get tickets. You got, I guess, basically, you got to pay for the rights to get your seats. You got to belong to the boosters. Bring in an opponent, at least a group of 5 opponent. I think I've spoken for the group on that one.
Sure. Yeah.
Yep.
Can I make a modest counter proposal?
Yes.
Oh.
Okay.
Hold on. Let me get your soapbox ready. Sorry.
It is election year. Make this either a week 0 or a preseason-esque type of game. You have to have X number of home games to package your tickets to the boosters. I think that's the way most boosters around the country do it. Make this your week 0 type. Make it a running clock if you so choose in the second half, if that alleviates some concerns. I fully get the roster size discrepancies. It's significant. I wish we would eventually see P4 versus FCS go away. But until that point, make it your week 0 and play it just as a warm-up.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it doesn't count. You can still give the FCF school the money, have some kind of restrictions on how many, you can only play your first team. I mean, legitimate. Let's have some restrictions. You can only play your first team or so many snaps and so forth and so on. So you're not just beating up on a, what was the old movie? You're just beating it was the, your Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson. You're just picking on a weaker kid. That's all you did. You picked on, that's what, it's kind of what they're doing. And listen, I can tell you from my personal experience, if I'd finished my career at Sanford, we were scheduled to play Auburn my senior year. If I had played in that game, I would have gotten destroyed by somebody like Tracy Rocker. It's not right. I mean, it's just not right. There's a reason they have different levels of football guys. You wouldn't listen to Florida State. Let's go. Let them go play the Cowboys one game a year. See how that works out for them. But anyway, let's quit doing that. It's beyond time. There's too much money in the game. There's too many safeties taking huge concerns in college football over the last several years. Let's make it fair if we're going to play those games. And right now, those games are not fair unless particularly for the Power 4 programs against these FCS teams where there's a huge difference. All right, we'll move on. That's my FCS public service announcement for at least the preseason. I'll get it back in and when Georgia Southern rolls back on our preseason or our season schedule, and I have to write up preview about them. So, all right. So number 11, we had Duke. All right. So I had him at 11. Kurt had him at 9. Bob had him at 10. Nick's starting to learn a little bit from me. He had him at 11 too. Listen, Manny Diaz has taken over a program where a lot of the players left after, some of the players left after Mike Elko left for Texas A&M, particularly Riley Leonard, who we'll talk about in a few minutes. Guys, this is a Friday night game. Bob, I'll let you talk a little bit about that. Do you see anything other than I think maybe it's squeezed in between two big games? I can't remember if it's squeezed in between Miami and Notre Dame or not. But anyway, your thoughts on the Duke game? I mean,
yeah, I think, first of all, don't love the Friday night games. Really don't like this for one of your premier schools to be playing on a Friday night in Florida State. But the only advantage I think for Duke here is you can see where they're going to be fired up at home to play that spotlight game. They've got a 4-star quarterback in Leak Murphy, the Texas transfer. Got a couple of receivers coming back. Some notable guys there, Jordan Moore and Sahir Haggins. It could be entertaining for a short amount of time. I just don't see depth of talent stacking up for Duke.
Yeah, I can't see Manny coming in here with that, Manny beating Mike with that Duke team against this Florida State team. I don't see it. Listen, it's hard to believe that, we would have probably had this Duke team a year ago ranked as the 5th or 6th toughest game on the schedule. So they slid way back in our perception of things. But we got Duke at 11. Then we got Boston College at 10. And Nick, I just want to get your thoughts on the Boston College game. Obviously, listen, I think we would have probably had Boston College in the same position last year to do this year. I don't think anybody thought much of them, particularly after almost getting lucky to beat Rhode Island the week before Florida State came to town. Speaking of FBS versus FCS matchups, which is what that one was. But just your thoughts on the Boston College game. And you had that at number 9, Nick, and I had that at number 9 as well. Bob had him at 11, and Kurt had him at 11. So you and I had them higher than Bob and Nick. Bob and Kurt. So just your thoughts on the Boston College game.
Yeah, I mean, look, really one guy, and that's Thomas Castellanos. I mean, he really surprised Florida State in that week 3 game last year. He went on to have an okay season after that. They've got a couple of good running backs. I think Trayshawn Ward's still there, isn't he? So familiar name coming in. I just have very similar to the way I feel about Duke, is like I have a hard time seeing a first year head coach. He's not obviously Bill O'Brien's had a lot of experience. A first year at a new program, coming in first ACC game at Doak at night early on in the season. It's the first game of the season for them. I just don't see Boston College posing too much of a threat. Whenever you have a versatile, elusive quarterback, that makes it very difficult on the defense. And, who knows, we might see a repeat of last year where he pulls some heroics out of the bag and maybe causes a little bit of trouble for the defense early on. Who knows? Overall, I just don't see Boston College being that much of a threat with what's the word I'm looking with the challenges that they have coming into this game.
Yeah, I think they're going to come in on Labor Day night. They're going to be at Florida State at night. That's different than being at Chestnut Hill on a noon kick on a dreary November. Or I think it was November. I don't remember when the hell the game was. But anyway, it was dreary. It was cold in Boston College when I was there last fall. All right, and listen, I think you only get concerned if they can start to run the ball against Florida State, because that's what they're going to do with Robichaud and Trayshawn Ward and Castellanos. And listen, the X factor is O'Brien, right? He's a really good play caller. He did a really good job at really, really trying circumstances at Penn State when he took over there for Joe Paterno. It's been a long time since he's been in the college game. The college game has changed a lot since he was last in it. So I think the unknown of what he's going to do with that offense and Castellanos and, they weren't that great on defense last year, but they managed to hang with Florida State for most of the game. I'd have to, I don't know how much better they are going to be on defense than they were last year. But then again, I don't know how much better Florida State's going to be on offense. Well, I don't think they're going to be better on offense than they were last year. But I kind of agree with you. I think the circumstance, where this falls on the calendar plays a part in it. Where it's played and when it's played is a part of this. And I agree with you. I think we all agreed. Boston College should be a game that Florida State, particularly if it's ACC championship game, should be able to run away with. Bob, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Bill O'Brien's in a year zero, right?
Yep.
I think that's a tough situation for him.
Yep. Yeah, because this place will be rocking on labor, whether it's temporary seating or not. It's going to be rocking.
Yeah, first game actually in Doak in the season. It's not a good recipe for success if you're trying to come into that as a new program.
Well, speaking about not a good recipe for success, as we move to number 9 and the Cal Bears coming to Florida State, I cannot think of a worse way to have to be introduced to ACC football if you're the Cal Bears than to come into Doak Campbell Stadium and what is likely to be either a noon or 3:30 kickoff because these guys are traveling across country. And I'm assuming that is some of the contingencies that the ACC was willing to concede to these schools to travel over here is that you get back home in a reasonable hour. I don't think the latest I think, Bob, this could be is a 5 p.m. ACC network game. Latest. So this Cal Bear team is going to come limping in here under year 8 under my man, and I like him too. He's a good coach, but just a hard program to coach. Anyway, listen, they did a little bit better in the portal than I thought I did when I did my research on them a couple of weeks ago. They got in a couple of top 100 portal guys, but I don't think that's enough to make up the difference. I think the Cal Golden Bears are going to come here, and unless we get some weird weather, they are just going to melt in this southern heat. And I think this is a blowout from start to finish.
When Mike Norvell does that whole thing, he's like, I pray for the hottest, most humid days of all time when he can practice the Seminoles out there.
Like Jacksonville.
In Jacksonville, right? He's going to pray for the hottest, most humid day on September 23rd when FSU plays Cal. And look, they've got a great running back. We all know what Jaden Ott can do. Quarterback from Miami area.
Yeah.
There is talent on the roster. Like Pat, you said, they've got transfer receivers. There is talent. But man, by the second quarter, when that humidity kicks in, I don't see Cal being able to keep up.
Yeah, I don't either. Listen, that's a difficult program to try to lead. I think the guy's done a good job. He went to a bowl game last year. They did bring in another quarterback to compete with the kid from Miami. It'll be interesting to see how that pans out. But yeah, listen, I had them ranked. I had it ranked as the 10th hardest game. Kurt 8, Bob 8, Nick 9. I just think this is a hard way for them to get introduced. And I think it's funny. We sit here talking like Jacksonville is so much hotter than Tallahassee.
No, it just happened to be that particular day.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying it's like they had to go to Jacksonville to get exposed to the elements. It does feel that way sometimes when you get over there, because there's no shade anywhere on that practice field.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, it was a compounding factor too because it had just dumped rain from Hurricane Debbie the day before, so it was moist and humid too.
Sauna.
Yeah. I look. I was not much of a football player, but I would absolutely destroy. I would shut down, body full deactivate, trying to practice or play in that weather.
You'd be surprised at what your body gets used to. Now, it was never easy. I'm not saying that, but you would be surprised. And listen, there are days when your body's just going to say, I can't do it. I've lost too much nutrients and all of that. And yeah, listen, I'm glad I drew the short straw and didn't have to go to Jacksonville after hearing the story. I'll say that. And we heard Otto talking about it the other day about how he just got off the bus after they got back from practice and started going into total body cramps. And that was he's got to be referring to the Jacksonville Jaguars day and that was even in the shade, right? So it had to be miserable hot. But yeah, so anyway, the Cal Bears are going to melt like they were going to Jacksonville, Florida, but they're going to do it in Tallahassee, Florida. So anyway, I don't think that's going to be much of a game, and we'll see. We'll see. There's always that surprise. All right, at number 8, we have Mac Brown's University of North Carolina Tar Heels. New quarterbacks for them. Drake May is off. They got Max Johnson and somebody else in there. I can't remember the kid's name off the top of my head, but I had UNC at 8, Kurt at 6, Bob at 9, Nick at 7. So at least we had them in consecutive order. But listen, yeah, this is, Bob, I'll say it. Let's just put it in the article. Mac Brown doesn't beat Florida State. He doesn't beat them when he's got better teams than Florida State or equal teams. This team is probably not going to be that. They don't have Drake May. It's at home. Mac's got to beat Florida State before I'll believe it.
And the book on North Carolina is very familiar. They can typically score points. They can typically not defend anybody. And that's what it's going to come down to. I'm not sure they're any better on defense. They've got a phenomenal running back, but do you have enough of the balance, the total package to pull off an upset?
Yeah, and I will say this, and I think Kurt, I'll give Kurt credit. I put it in my notes too, but since Kurt's not with us, I'll let him to kind of speak for him. And he said his worry was this falls in between Miami and Notre Dame. And as I can remember Coach Bowden talking about this when my father coached for Coach Bowden. It's hard to have your team razor sharp every single Saturday night, and and we saw the trap game at Boston College last year, right? I mean, that was the game that almost got them. The ball bounces off Keon's leg into the out of bounds. If it bounced back, it's Boston College anyway. So that I agree with you. I think I kind of agree with Kurt there. I can't see North Carolina beating Florida State, but it does fit in a weird place in the schedule.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Nick, you got any more thoughts?
No, nothing to add. I think you nailed it perfectly. I mean, the perfect line is I have to see Mac Brown beat Florida State before I can actually believe it. I was not impressed with what they did. They've had 2 NFL quarterbacks in a row with Sam Howell and Drake May, and managed to lose to Florida State all 3 times that they played them in that 3 to 4 year span. So, I mean, look, anything can happen. I do think Kurt has a good point. Falls in a very difficult part of the schedule. Potential to look ahead towards definitely your hardest game on the schedule, as we all agree, Notre Dame on the road. But there are certain things that you need to see to believe, and I need to see, North Carolina come in and actually bring in to Florida State before I say that they can beat them at home.
Yeah, well, and Matt made a weird comment at the ACC media days where he said he thought this team may be more well balanced or better because they weren't trying to win a quarterback the Heisman. And it was a strange comment because you should never be trying to win an award from any one player on your team when it's the ultimate team sport, where you're trying to win as many games as possible. And the fact that he would make that comment made me think about the direction of that program. And I cannot imagine that many coaches would come out and say, hey, we weren't calling the best plays for the rest of that particular situation. We were calling plays for Drake May and who's the other kid that used to Sam Howell. I can't believe that he would say that, hey, we were trying to do the best thing for the individual over the team. And listen, that mentality is not going to beat a Florida State team, I don't think. So I'll say that too, to add on a little bit about why I almost put North Carolina a little bit deeper than 8, but he's won a national title. I can only put him down so far. So yeah. All right, let's go to number 7. This was funny because we got Memphis at 7. I had him at 7. Kurt had him at 10. Bob had him at 4. Nick had him at 8. All right, so Bob, I think that this is, you and I have talked about this before. As I do these scouting reports, you have to read them. So you're the one that gets to, and I think we all, when I start doing my scouting reports, the one thing I ask myself when I'm done, do I feel better about FSU's chances against this opponent, or do I feel worse about FSU's chances against this opponent? And I thought about putting Memphis higher than 7. You did. You put them at 4. talk a little bit about why. I think we share some of the same observations on Memphis, and I think that I think you may be more in the right direction than we are.
I think I'm a little bit bullish on Memphis just as being one of those top G5 teams in the country. They're a potential playoff team, as that top G5 is going to sneak in, likely as that 12 seed. Like Seth Hennigan, almost a 4,000-yard passer, got a 1,000-yard receiver. The defense is a question mark, but, Pat, as you've researched, Memphis hit the portal really hard.
Yep.
They've got FedEx money. They can afford to hit the portal. So you're not only retaining your talent, you're going out there and pulling some guys in who maybe it wasn't working out at a P4, but come to Memphis and try to win a league championship. I don't think Memphis pulls off the upset, but it is the type of scare that you don't want to see from a guarantee game. Let's be honest about it.
Yeah, listen, they brought in guys like Elijah Herring, Tennessee's leading tackler from a year ago. They brought in a guy that was a finalist for the Harlan Hill Award at running back who spent one season at South Carolina last year, but before that, I believe was at Newberry, if memory serves. Listen, this is a guy that will be prepared for Mike. He coached for Mike and Ryan Silverfield, so there's going to be some familiarity. These guys are friends. They talk. Obviously, Silverfield has been here for every summer for camp, and so obviously he and Mike have a good relationship. He coached offensive line for Mike. But, yeah, this team is, this would be a team that I'd be, hey, you better come out, boys, you better come out with your A game or you're going to find yourself down. They got all three of their three leading receivers back from last year's team. Their starting quarterback. They did bring in some offensive line transfers. And I'll use Lee Corso line as I did in my little write-up when we shared the write-up, the round table. This one might be closer than experts think on Memphis. But, Nick, you got any thoughts on Memphis?
What did I think I had them at 8, if I remember.
You did indeed.
Yeah, well, obviously it's a fun storyline game because of the relationship between Silverfield and Norvell, and obviously Norvell coming from Memphis. I think this game has potential to find some garbage time there, but the more, and you made the point before we started this that we did this earlier in the week, but the more and more we see practices, we might have a little bit of different. Like I could definitely see this offense generating.
Dude, this is about the third natural born segue you've created and not even known. You're getting really good.
I'm good at this. I'm good at this. Anyways, to finish the thought, to kind of just mopping up what you guys have already talked on, your talking points, Elijah Herring, they hit the portal hard. Had I done a rankings today instead of late last week, I probably would have ranked Memphis higher. It's one of those games that I think has the potential for garbage time, but this is especially with, I feel like, the attitude of Memphis. Like Memphis has traditionally been that G5 school that really doesn't give a damn and will come in and beat you if you're not prepared. So Florida State has to be prepared for this game, but if they handle their business, there will be garbage time.
Ooh, I don't know about garbage time.
You don't know about garbage time?
They may get them by 14, 17 by the end of the game, but no, I don't know if I see any garbage time. I mean, we'll see. I mean, Memphis had a bad defense. That's last year. That's a good thing. But they've thrown a lot of money at that defense, and can't correct everything in 1 year sometimes. But the portal helps. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's gonna be a.
It might get to 14 by the end. Maybe
I think I can see 14, 17 towards the end. Yeah. I just don't know how much. You can get maybe a series or two, hopefully, but
that still counts. Counts as garbage time.
They're going to be preseason ranked in the top 25. I'm not sure. I mean, we got to factor in the team that they're going to play, not the team that Florida State had here last year.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. So now this one we were talking about how you want to change any of your predictions. We had Georgia Tech rolling in at number 6 as the number 6 toughest team on Florida State's schedule. I had them at 4, Kurt 7, Bob 7, Nick 4. I think Kurt and Bob might want to move theirs up after the last week of practice. I don't know. Bob, you had them at 7. Nick and I had them at 4. Listen, I just think with all the unknowns, this is going to be the first game of the year. A lot of new pieces on offense for Florida State, something that Georgia Tech does not have to worry about. They get a lot of their skills guys back, including their quarterback, obviously, and then Jamal Haynes, the running back. So you got Haynes, King, Jamal Haynes. You got 3/5 of your offensive line back. I don't know. When I studied their portal pickups, it didn't impress me as much as Memphis and SMU. But I don't know how, listen, Brent had a good year last year. Maybe he felt comfortable with some of the younger guys. He did bring in a whole new defensive coaching staff, and Tyler Santucci is now running the 4-2-5 defense. He was Elko's defense coordinator at Doak last year. I put season openers can be tricky. I know the spread is 12 points. Listen, as I've said before, I don't know if we're going to really know anything about this football team, and that include any football team until the first week's here. Then we'll have at least a baseline for all the teams that we think are going to be good, bad, indifferent, whatever. Listen, the spread has gone from 13.5 to 12 on this game. I think it's going to. I don't know why Vegas is playing with the spread. I don't think I'd touch 12 in FSU right now. I guess is what I'm trying to say. This game, I think at 4 for me feels about right because of where it sits on the schedule, all the unknowns going into this season. How is DJU going to lead this offense? Who's going to be the playmakers on the outside? Is the offensive line as good as we think they are? How deep is FSU on offense? So we got this one. Georgia Tech's got a lot of these same questions, but I think 4 sounds about right for Georgia Tech, given everything that's going on. You're taking a team cross country. I think one of the reasons Mike is waiting as late as in the week to take this team to Ireland is so that it has more of the feel of a regular season game versus going out early in the week and it being more like a bowl game atmosphere. So I've got them at 4, and I feel really good about where they're ranked in my schedule. You weren't as worried about them, Bob. You had them at 7. Listen, I know there's probably not a lot of difference between 4 and 7 in rankings, but what are your thoughts on Georgia Tech after 17 practices?
I'll be really curious what Kelly Quinlan from the Georgia Tech Rivals site tells us. And, I think there's optimism about Georgia Tech on offense because of the returning pieces, because of Haynes King, because of the continuity there. A lot of questions about what they can do on defense. But I'm 100% with you guys. This feels like that unpredictable first game mindset of just going to be some crazy stuff that happens, and it may not go Florida State's way. How do you react? How does Florida State react to adversity? I'm not trying to pull a Norvell talking point, but they could find some weird adversity because it's Ireland, because it's a little bit different, because Georgia Tech, you don't have maybe great film because you're looking at last year's film. There's a lot of different factors here.
Yeah. Nick?
Yeah, I would rank them at 4 with you, Pat. I felt that was about where they needed to be. I feel very similar as you do. It's always weird during the first game of the season. As much as we can say, well, Georgia Tech doesn't know how to pregame for what this offense may look like with DJ. We've been watching a bunch of scout team, and who knows if Haynes King and that offense is going to look exactly like what we think it's going to look like in that regard too. The closer we get to the game and the more practice we watch, I feel more solid about Georgia Tech being a more difficult game than people give them credit for. Traditionally and recently, Georgia Tech has not been, in the upper. I think they've been sitting around the middle of the ACC. Look, this game could have some weird moments, some kinks that Florida State needs to work out. And I don't know if I would go as far to say that they may find themselves down in this game. Florida State, I'm saying, may find themselves down early in this game, but, would not be surprised,
Oh, listen, I think this game's going 4 full quarters.
It's 4 full quarters. There you go.
Yeah, listen, and I would not be surprised if there were multiple lead changes to this game. I'm not sure it's going to be a high-scoring game. And we'll
No,
get
if you ask me right now, I'd probably say 24-17 Florida State.
Yeah, I think I think it'll be in that ballpark. I was thinking about this last night, and and we're going to give preseason predictions on a weekly basis, obviously. But I was thinking if I had to pick it today, what would it be? And I had 24-22. I think it's going to be I think it's going to be a cutter. I can't say the other word, I don't guess, but I think it's going to be a cutter.
Yeah.
I think the sphincter factor is going to be very tight going into that game for a lot of people, lot of people. And I think it's going to be a hell of a game. And I might be right. Might be right, might be wrong. We'll see. But right now, that's what I think. All right, let's go to numbers. I think we're at number 5. All right, now this was another one as I dug deeper into my scouting report. I could, listen, as you get closer to number 1, it gets harder to know where to put, the weight. It gets weightier to where you're going to have to put them. We have SMU at number 5. I had them at 6, Kurt at 4, Bob at 6, Nick at 5. So we're all the same general vicinity. I look at, we had who we got at 5. We got SMU. I couldn't put them in front of Florida, Miami, Notre Dame, or Clemson. I just couldn't do it. Now, if everybody's right about Florida and they're just going to suck all season, which I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case, maybe I should have been more aggressive and put them at 4. I think 4 is about where I would have limited them, I guess. No, I'm sorry. Hold on. We're supposed to be at Florida, right?
Florida's in top.
We just talked about GT at 6 and 5.
Oh yeah, sorry. SMU. I should have. I don't know. This was one of those things where I thought about putting SFU in front of Florida. I just didn't know. I don't think I can do it. I just couldn't do it. And I got Florida in front of Georgia Tech. Yeah. So, but as another game, the more I did the research, the more like, you know what? They're going to have to go to Dallas, and this is going to be a football game. If SMU's defense can play the same level of football this year as they did last year, and they've got a lot of offensive production coming back from last year's team, you're going to what looks like a very I don't know how to put it, Snuggy Hill environment at SMU. You're about 35,000 seats. It's a similar size stadium, but you're going in for their ACC opener. SMU's thrown a lot of money at this program since it entered the ACC. They're coming off a championship season in the ACC last year, AAC last year. Rhett Lashley has got it going on offense. Listen, I think this one's going to, I think it's going to be an extremely close game. I'll put it to you that way. What do you think, Bob?
I think it's kind of similar to Memphis in a sense. You've done veteran receivers, Elijah Roberts, the edge rusher, the Miami transfer. There's enough danger there to scare you. It's probably going to be a 50-50 crowd, and there's going to be a lot of Florida State fans from Texas buying up those SMU tickets. I think this one, everybody's kind of looking at how SMU did last year against Power 5 opponents. They were 0-3. So yes, this is a big transition. I do think there's enough talent, enough firepower to scare teams. Yes.
Yeah, listen, they went and got, like you mentioned, they went out and got some big boys in the portal too up front, especially on defense. They brought in several transfers on defense. I want to say, no, it was Memphis that brought in 16. But yeah, listen, I think the Ponies are going to be a little bit more difficult than everybody else thinks, or most people think. I shouldn't say that. I think we all think they're going to be a formidable opponent. Nick, what do you got on the Mustangs? What are you thinking?
First road game of the season for Florida State. I don't know how ruckus that crowd is going to be in Dallas. I don't know if it's going to be a 50-50 game or if it's going to be a 75-25. I don't know, but emotions will be high for SMU, and I do think that they have enough talent to scare you. I don't know if this is a game that's going to go 4 full quarters. I think if games are truly won and lost in the trenches, as is the saying, they lost a lot of talent and production on their offensive and defensive line. So if it comes down to who wins the trenches, I think I wrote in the article that I like Florida State's odds there, which I think over time with the amount of depth that they have there, that'll make the game easier over time. And this is what game 4, 5 on the schedule, so they'll have a better idea about the identity of the team at that point. Definitely think that the Mustangs have the talent to give Florida State a scare, but I don't know if it's going to be enough to beat them.
All right. Well, we got SMU at 5, and coming in front of SMU, this is one of the weirder ones to watch the votes on. We have Florida at 4. I had him at 3, Kurt at 5, Bob at 5, and Nick at 6. Listen, it's Florida. They may have struggled last year. They've got good talent, just like when Florida State was, Florida State's always going to have some football players on its roster. Florida's got some. They did it. I thought they did not get much credit for what they did in the portal this year. Their average player ranking in the portal was well above Miami's. And Miami's getting all the love for all the work they did in the portal, and then Florida's numbers are higher. And if you look at per ranking per player, I think it's fun. I think it's fun to talk. Florida's going to stink. Florida's going to stink if you're a Florida State fan. I get it. Everybody hates the Gators. But listen, Billy Neighbor hasn't forgotten to coach. Has it taken him some time to get this program under control? Yes, it took Mike 3 years to get rolling. And Mike's not going to have to coach against this particular schedule in year 3, or didn't have to coach against that kind of schedule in year 3. Does he have a hard schedule? Yeah, but it's the SEC. There's not an easy schedule in the SEC. And we're already seeing Texas has lost 2 running backs. So is that good? They're not going to face the same Texas team now as they were yesterday. Christian Clark's out. CJ, can't remember. Baxter's out. So listen, things are changing by the day. This was net. Football is not played out on a piece of paper. And we all want to sit here and look at Florida and what they did last year. And some of those teams that we think, are going to be great in the SEC are not going to be as good as we think they are. Some of the teams that we don't think are going to be very good are going to be better than we think they are. And the same thing is going to be said in the ACC and every other conference in America. But this is the last game of the year. Could we see a similar pattern in Florida in year 3 that we did in Florida State when everybody was ready to throw out the baby with the bathwater at 0-4 in year 3 or year 2, whatever year it was? I can't remember. It's been but anyway, I think and listen, I've talked to somebody that's been at Florida's practice, and somebody I respect. He thinks they're going to be better than everybody is giving them credit for, and I asked him why, and he kind of gave me some reasons, and I respect his opinion. I was already leaning that way anyway. And listen, no matter what kind of Florida team comes in here, guys, there's going to be implications for this Florida State football team. Should be implications. Now, if Florida State lives up to the lofty expectations of some of the fan base, I've already seen undefeated stuff on the boards. Florida State's going undefeated. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But if they are 11-0 coming into this game, or 10-1, or whatever it turns out to be, there's playoff implications depending on whether or not you think 2 teams from the ACC can get into the playoff. It'll be vitally important that they win this game. If they're having a disappointing season, it's going to be a pressurized game because it ends the year on a high note, at least the regular season. And listen, when all you hear as a football player or football coach and as a football team is that you're going to suck, it does serve as a motivating factor. And that's all Florida has heard from every side of it. And I just think this is going to be a little bit, and again, it's Florida. We've seen Florida State teams during the Taggart era that probably shouldn't have been able to compete with Florida, and they did, in closer games. But I think this is always going to be a tough game, and that's why I had it at number 3. And there's going to be a lot of pressure, should be a lot of pressure on Florida State entering this game if they're as good as we think they could be, if they, to use Mike terms, reach their full potential. But anyway, so you guys had them a little bit And I'm sure I've already kind of expressed the reason why y'all have them knocked down. But go ahead, y'all take Florida. Why you got them where you have them?
I think the argument for Florida is, in part, this has been a one-score game the last 3 years. They didn't play during COVID, but these games have come down to the fourth quarter, emotional, intense type of games where a turnover can sway it. Graham Mertz, year 2, we will see. Jury's still out on what he looks like. I think losing ETN is pretty huge for that offense because ETN solved a lot of just didn't have enough on Florida's offense last year. Is Montrell Johnson capable of picking up that slack? We know they've got some defensive talent. We know they've got some defensive shortcomings, tackles, forcing takeaways last year. It wasn't a really good defense. If they can be a little bit better, I don't know if it's going to be reflective in the record, but it will be interesting to watch how Florida plays from start to finish.
Well, there's a question that we got to ask for. We're going to have to see with both teams. All right, we're talking about two teams as they're constructed today, right? I mean, we're going to be 12 games into a season by the time this gets here. What do these teams look like physically? Who's beat up? Who's not? Go ahead, Nick.
And that's kind of like why I ranked them a little bit lower. I had them right in the middle at 6. Could Florida end up being better than we all think that they will be this year? Definitely. Are these games traditionally close? Yes. Is it a rivalry game? Yes. Emotions are going to be high. I like to have the belief that if Florida State has the season that we're expecting, like let's say a potential college football playoff, if this final game is going to have the implications that we think that it will, it's going to be at home, high pressure environment, emotional crowd. If Florida is not above the shoulders ready for that game, I don't, but not even just above the shoulders, but physically as well. After that back half of that schedule, that's where my hesitancy comes in terms of where I rank them here. Are they going to be able to come into that environment after potentially losing a whole bunch of games with all of the smoke outside of the program about who is coming and going? Like there's so much, it's a pressure cooker of a game, which is, I think what we're all saying, and it comes at you in a different variety of angles and ways. I just don't know if projecting like how we think things are going to be, if they're going to be able to handle that and they're going to be able to come in and win. You kind of, I don't know. I kind of rambled on about that, but you get the general idea of what I'm saying there.
Yeah. Listen, it's always going to be fun because it's Florida State, and it's going to be interesting to see what both, listen, I think it's going to be interesting to see what both teams look like when we get to week 12.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of questions about Florida, obviously, heading into this season. And, listen, I got some questions myself about the team we cover. So, we'll see. All right, so number 3. All right, so, this one was hard for me, guys, because I have it at 5. Kurt had it at 2, Bob at 2, Nick at 2. I mean, Bob at 3, Nick at 2. And we got Miami at 3. I had them at 5. Listen, it seems like every year, particularly the last 5 years that I've been doing this and have access to message boards and what the opposing people are saying, Miami always thinks they're back. They're always back. They've been in the ACC since, 2009 and played the championship game once. I think that's correct. Listen, they haven't been beaten up on people. They live in the past. They've gone and hired a guy from the past, Mario Cristobal, who's got questionable game management decisions as a coach, not only at Georgia Tech last year, but he was a game out and he's done it several times. Listen, I've heard from multiple people now who either coached or play football at a high level that think Cam Ward's the real deal. I've also heard that from one person who's familiar with the program that he does not believe that they are very team oriented. He phrased it as a team of individuals. And listen, their average portal ranking, if you took Florida State's average player taken in the portal was 372nd. Now listen, there were over 1,000 kids ranked in the portal. So, and listen, even Grady Kelly, Grady Kelly was in the thousands. I think I think that's the right ranking. Probably not. I think it's probably better than that. A lot better than that, actually. But there were a ton of kids in the portal. Miami's average ranking in the portal was 560th best player. Florida State's was 372nd. Florida was 457th. So you can go back and if you belong to Osceola, you can go look at the Rivals rankings at the Rivals transfer portal site. But anyway, so did they get that much better than Florida State in the portal? Did they get much better than anybody else in the portal? Really? Even the big defensive lineman they brought in from Michigan State was ranked like 700th in the portal. So now listen, maybe they don't put enough value on portal offensive and defensive linemen in the portal in those rankings. I don't know. And then listen, if this game's even anywhere next to close, Mike Norvell is going to outwit Mario Cristobal with his hands tied behind his back. Yeah, well, Jiren, I don't know how you say your name. It was not made up, but that's okay. That's okay. But anyway, long story short, I think that if it's a close game, it's Florida State all the way. I think Miami would have to blow Florida State out, and I'm not sure they're capable of doing that.
I think what scares me is Cam Ward plus all that receiving talent. You start to see how it can get into a potential for a shootout. You don't want to get into that neighborhood with Miami. On the flip side, beyond Ruben Bain, Miami usually has good safeties and DBs, but they've got some major question marks on defense. I feel good about Florida State against Miami. I feel good about the crowd whenever Florida State goes down to Miami. That tends to be a 50-50 type of crowd, good for Florida State. But I think there is a roadmap to a shootout, and I don't like roadmaps to a shootout when we have questions about Florida State's passing game. Is I think would be my question mark.
Well, there's that.
Yeah. No, it's not. It never feels safe to pick Miami in terms of like first or second or third toughest game on the schedule, because this team, and we have seen it in years prior, if things go wrong, they do have the tendency to spiral. So I think that this team is much improved talent-wise. I think they'll be much better this year. I think they'll give Florida State a pretty good game this year. Assume it's going to be a top 25 matchup, assuming when they play each other. I think it's going to be a tough game. I think it's going to be a close game. It's just a question of, and to your point, Pat, in those tough moments when it comes down to X's and O's and coaching ability, I think Mike wins out there. We have, Cristobal has too many oopsies in that area to have you feel real confident about Miami taking that step in beating Florida State this year and breaking a losing streak. So I think Miami's going to be a lot better. The team of individuals does not, that from your source, that does not surprise me. And that kind of lends further to my idea, thinking that if this team does have a bump in the road, that there is that tendency to spiral that we've seen over the past 3 to 4 years will continue to be there. And who knows, by the time the game rolls around in a couple of weeks or so, things may be different. Yeah.
So it's going to, they definitely got some talent. It is at Miami, but I think I'm going to, for right now, I'll take Mike over if you want to go down to if there's going to be a close game. I think we all think it'll be a close game. I'm going to take Mike over Mario, and that was a deciding factor for me and why I put him where I did. And listen, it's an in-state rivalry. It's always going to be a great game most of the time, anyway. And I think this will be, a tight game for sure. But yeah, I think that I ranked it a little bit further down on mine. All right, coming down to number 2. I think this was almost unanimous. We have Clemson at 2. I had them at 2, Kurt at 3, Bob at 2, Nick at 3. So, yeah, we all had them right there. Listen, this is Clemson's the only 9-win team that made sound like they had a losing season last year. It's the first time in 14 years they haven't had a 10-win season. I believe, if my math is correct. No, I'm sorry. They had 12 10 or plus win seasons before this. They were within a play of beating Florida State. If they had not fumbled the ball twice on the goal line, they don't. And if if in this, we can if in that all day long. But Clemson, I don't think is as far off as everybody thinks they are. The fact that everybody's been talking down to Clemson, I think it's going to add to the fire. Listen, Clay Klubnik's going to be in his second year in Garrett Riley's system. Maffa's back. Listen, they also got a ton of guys on defense as far as what guys that are classified returning starters, but I can't remember the last time Clemson wasn't good on defense. Now, obviously, there's always that chance, but I just think that I think Clemson's happy with everybody just kind of overlooking them right now. Nobody's really talking about them. All the talk in the ACC right now seems to be centered around Florida State, Miami, and every now and then you hear a little bit about NC State and Louisville. But everybody's saying Clay can't do it. You know, he's not Trevor Lawrence. No, he's not Trevor Lawrence. There's very few people on earth that are Trevor Lawrence. That's why he's making about $500 million in the NFL, wherever the hell he just signed for. But I think this is going to be a really tough game for Florida State, and I think Florida State's going to have to be able to do two things on offense: one run and two throw. And you know, we think we're going to be able to do one thing. We're not sure about the other. But listen, I think that Clemson likes everybody downplaying them. Everybody's down on Dabo because they didn't go into the transfer portal. I don't know what that has to do with it, but you get your players where you get your players from. But anyway, what do you guys think about Clemson? I think it's going to be a very tough game at home.
I don't agree with Dabo's philosophy, but I understand why he wants to do that. I think the talent at Clemson is pretty darn good. I mean, you got an All-American linebacker, Barrett Carter. You've got some really big-time guys up front who are developing. I think they have a freshman All-American from last year. Lost a ton of guys on defense to the NFL. I think they had 5 draft picks. But Clemson restocks pretty well. Phil Maffa running back. I'm not sure if Klubnik has that kind of receiver talent that a Trevor Lawrence had back in the day. And maybe that's why Klubnik doesn't look like a Clemson quarterback from prior years, but that's still a roster that kind of scares me, honestly. And this would not surprise, I don't think, any of us if Clemson did pull off the upset.
Yep.
No, I agree. I absolutely see a world in which Clemson comes in and wins this game. It's funny because I see a lot of similarities between Florida State and Clemson in terms of like what their overall season could look like and what it's dependent on. It's dependent on a lot of younger guys taking steps this year in key positions. You talk about, I mean, Phil Maffa is one heck of a running back. I think more so that statement is directed towards Cade Klubnik and some of the receiver talent on the outside. We know that their defense is going to be good. It's always going to be good. They have great linebackers, great defensive line talent, and they're going to be a challenge to beat on any day. I guess the ace in the hole is that you get them at home if you're Florida State. I think depth-wise, the fact that, and this is my own opinion, the fact that Dabo doesn't really do well in the portal, I think that hurts overall, especially when we see teams and seasons that are longer than ever in terms of how you're going to have to cycle guys in and out. I think this is the 6th game on the schedule this year, so it's about halfway through. So, I mean, things could look massively different in terms of 1s and 2s and how injuries are going. But like I said to start, it really depends on the season depends on their key guys taking steps in positions that they need to take steps in. And I think it's definitely a scary roster full of talent. Would not be surprised if they came into Doak and beat Florida State. That's why they were, I think I had them at number 3, but still they're going to be a good team.
Yeah, going in, it's, you question whether Clemson's offense, because, there's basically a strength going to get strength, right? Clemson's offense should be pretty good. Florida State's defense should be pretty good. Clemson's replacing a lot of people on defense, and Florida State's replacing a lot of people on offense. Most of it's production from last year. So which of those, who's got the strongest, weakest unit, right? It's
right.
Who's the strongest, weakest? Who's got the strongest, weakest link, basically. But yeah, and listen, both these teams will have a better idea of who they are on both sides of the ball, but particularly Florida State on offense and Clemson on defense by the time we get to this game. So I think it's always going to be a tough game. I think you mentioned it, Kurt. This will forever be a tough game. It's just going to be as long as these two teams are in the ACC, and that could change tomorrow for all we know. that this will always be one of the premier games in the ACC, and these two teams, as long as they're in the ACC, should always run the ACC. These should always be, once every 4 years at the minimum, these two teams should be in a championship game in the ACC. You're gonna have magical runs by, an NC State team from time to time. They got Grayson McCall this year. They're all fired up about him, and Virginia Tech's on the rise with Kyron Drones. Kyron Drones. North Carolina is going to have, Anyway, my point is we're going to see more volatility in all conferences because of the portal and the ability to flip rosters quickly. And sometimes you're going to be able to flip more kids than you are the other because now you got kids tied into NIL and all kinds of things. That's always going to be interesting. But so I think it's going to be a great game, and it's always fun when Clemson comes to town. It's a great atmosphere, and hopefully that'll be a night game and not a nooner or a 3:30 game. But it's October, so the weather could be good either way. All right, so let's move on to number one. This was unanimous. The only two games that were unanimous were the first one and the last one, the toughest one and the weakest one.
Good for conversation.
Yeah. Notre Dame, man. We all had Notre Dame, and of course, I think we all kind of agree. You're heading to what we believe preseason polls and put a lot of stock in those. This is going to be a matchup between two top 10 teams in November, maybe in the afternoon, maybe at night, maybe in nice fall weather, maybe in winter weather. Notre Dame, are they better than we expected? Florida State better than we expected? Are they both worse than we expect? But either way, it should be a good game. And the X factor will be the weather. And listen, it's in November, so the health factor is going to be an issue for both teams. Could be. But I just think looking at the schedule, because of all those reasons, and listen, we waited 2 years to see a healthy Riley Leonard in person. We were looking forward to seeing him last year against Florida State, and he played on one leg. But what do you guys think about that Notre Dame game, and what makes it? Why do you guys think it's the toughest game on the schedule?
I think Riley Leonard is part of it. I think Al Golden's defense, it's a top 10 scoring defense. They brought in edge rusher RJ Oben from Duke. It's they got Howard Cross, another edge rusher, Xavier Watts, a bunch of interceptions. I feel like you've got enough offense, defense. Notre Dame teams typically run the ball very well too, so you can dictate against Florida State by countering with Notre Dame's run. I believe, is this locked in as a night game up there? Because it feels like that kind of prime time NBC.
Yeah, well, if it's NBC, I think it would be.
It's a 7:30 game, so it is a night game.
Good.
Appropriately so, right? Like it feels like that kind of premier game.
Yep. Nick, what do you think about the Irish?
Yeah, I think this game has the potential to dogpile a couple of unfavorable circumstances. If you're the Seminole, it's on the road. It could be really cold. It could be. I think that Notre Dame is going to be every bit of the team that the preseason polls think that they're going to be. I think it's going to be a very, very good team. It's at the butt end of a really tough part of the schedule. You go Clemson, Duke. Obviously, Duke. We all predict Florida State's going to win that game. But then Miami, UNC, which may or may not be problematic. We talked about that earlier in the show. And then Notre Dame is really your toughest last test of the year, so to speak. So, and that's before a bye week. So that's the end of a stretch where you're playing a lot of games. It's going to be on the road in a tough and a loud, potentially cold environment. If those variable circumstances dogpile into one snowball, that's just going to be a super, super tough game to win. It would be for anybody. But especially with the way that this Florida State team is looking in the preseason, I think that it every bit is the toughest game of the season.
Yeah, you got SMU, Clemson at Miami, and North Carolina in 4 of the 5 weeks leading up to that game. So it's going to be a pretty tough stretch, and that precedes the Charleston Southern game and before and obviously and then you get Florida. So I think it's in the toughest stretch of the schedule based on what we think of these teams coming in. We think SMU is going to be good. We think Clemson is going to be good. We think Miami is going to be good. Who knows about North Carolina? But so you feel like you could be playing as many as 3 ranked teams in 5 of the weeks leading up to Notre Dame. So that would be 4 ranked games in 6 weeks, essentially, for Florida State. So, listen, I'm just glad we're talking about the schedule and not talking about camp. We have one more official camp practice to cover tomorrow on Thursday, and we will be back with Seminole Sidelines tomorrow. We were going to talk about a little bit about the Rivals top 250 rankings, but I think since we're about to reach the hour and a half mark, we will hold off on those tomorrow. But we do know that Tramel Jones made we'll talk about those in totality tomorrow, but Tramel Jones made the biggest jump of any of the Florida State Rivals commits in the Rivals top 250. He moved up 55 spots and is now ranked as the 35th best overall prospect in the country. He was obviously previously ranked 90th. And then we saw Javion Hilson. He moved up 19 spots and is now ranked as the 14th best overall prospect in the class of 2025. And as we reported earlier in the week, he was also now rated as a 5-star prospect. So they have 2 5-stars committed in Javion Hilson and Solomon Thomas. And, of course, I think, and Nick, I know you were surprised by this. And listen, when somebody moves up, somebody's got to move down. But we did see C.J. Wiley, who both of us thought might get a bump. We did see him move down 12 spots. He went into this weekend as a 71st best overall prospect in the nation. And listen, I'll be honest with you. I'm not sure how big a difference between the 70th ranked player and the 85th ranked player there is, to be honest with you. I think we're grasping at straws to figure out the difference.
It's just rankings, and it only makes you mad if you let it. Basically.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
But yes, I was a little surprised to see him drop.
But he's still a hell of a football player. Whatever.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. So,
and
then probably the one other thing I do want to bring up is Malik Clark, who verbally committed to Florida State in late July from Rock Hill, South Carolina, the wide receiver. He made his debut in the rankings in the top 250 at 239. But you can go to the Osceola. We've got all of the players' new updated rankings that were in the top 50 on the front page. You can check that out, theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com. We've been going on about an hour and a half, and we're pretty good at talking, but we're going to wrap it up for today because we've got to come back tomorrow. We're going to have Kelly Quinlan from the Georgia Tech rival site to give us what he has seen from the Yellow Jackets and what his expectations are for Georgia Tech as they get ready to head over to Ireland next week. And Kelly has been covering Georgia Tech for quite some time and has been a guest on our show before. So if you're going to tune in tomorrow, we'll be live at 3 o'clock. Jerry's also going to join us to talk a little bit about what some of the administrative things Florida State had to go through and logistical things Florida State is going through to get this team prepared to go to Ireland. I believe there's already an equipment truck on its way to Orlando, if I'm not mistaken, or getting ready to go to Orlando. They're going to fly a ton of equipment over, but Jerry's got a lot of details. He talked with Bruce Warwick, the general manager of the football program, as well as Jeff Cupper and some other people about what Florida State's doing logistically. So if you're interested in that, we will have that, and we'll have some notes from practice as well, as we expect Florida State to be back in pads again tomorrow after a light day today. But we want to thank you for joining us. If you're not an Osceola subscriber, please go to theosceola.com and hit the subscribe button, and we'd love to have you as a subscriber. And we have a lot of free content you can check out as well before you subscribe. And we think you enjoy what you see. And if you do, we just ask that you sign up for either a monthly or annual membership. We think you'll enjoy it. And then if you listen to us, either this as a podcast or video cast, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and you get notifications. You can sign up for notifications and let you know when we're doing shows like this, whether they're live or taped. And we are usually going to be here at 6 p.m. on Monday nights, every Monday night moving forward. And then we will be here on Wednesday and Thursdays afternoon at 3 o'clock live. And we will do a post-game show once the season starts, about 10 or 15 minutes after each game ends, right here on the Osceola YouTube channel. And we're going to have, for the first post-game, we're going to have my brother join me. Shane Burnham will be our football analyst. Shane has coached at Iowa State, Rutgers, UCF, Richmond, Elon, multiple places, and had been at Florida State as an analyst for the last 3 years. So he is going to join us and give us some of his insight into the X's and O's parts of football and help us break down the Georgia Tech Florida State game on First Impressions post game. Mark Salvo will be joining us again this year as well. Mark is going to try to join us after the Georgia Tech game with Jerry from Ireland. So we hope to have a full house with a lot going on. Hope you enjoy it. But if you're not a subscriber, please go to theosceola.com and please follow us on Osceola YouTube. Nick, Bob, appreciate it as always. Always fun to talk football, and can't wait to see how our schedule strength when we sit back down here and look at this in 5 months, how we got it right and how we got it wrong.
Absolutely, man.
All right, fellas, have a good one.